Thank you and good morning. It's great to be here. In addition to talking about wise decisions, we're going to talk about how you do that using the value of life mapping. But I've got to just start with saying when Roger asked me to do this a year ago, it sounded like a really good idea. This morning at about 4:15, when my eyes opened up and I jumped out of bed to about 21 degrees, I started wondering if it was a wise decision. But since you're all here, I do thank you, and it is a wise decision. So I'm going to talk about the value of creating a life map. But before I do that, I would like to take you back to my journey of how I started that process. And I started that back in about 1992. I was living in Paradise, San Diego, California. I was married with 4 children, working for this Fortune 500 company, and I had this beautiful view of the sun setting from my office. The only bad news is I saw it set a lot of nights in the summertime. And although it doesn't set as late as it does up here, you still shouldn't be in an office that late on a regular basis. So needless to say, that started to have an impact on family, on life. I was a first-line manager in this organization, and although we discussed family and work-life balance, that was really the extent of the reality of it in our lives. So, before I celebrate my 15th anniversary, before the golden handcuffs closed, as we find they do when you stay at a corporation that long, I decided to go off to a small family-owned business in the local area. But it was really a little too late already. The impact of time away, long hours, I found myself in the process of a divorce. The family business didn't really work out. A year and a half later, I found myself without a job. And my buddy kindly shared with me that if I could no longer pay the rent, I should probably find a place to live. So here I am, close to homeless, a far cry from top performance for many years in this large organization. And I had to get to the point of asking this new woman I was now dating if I could move in with her. So not the best of times, to say the least. I remember going for a run, and back then, that's probably not really a good expression, going for a run. I really didn't run back then. But I found myself running with my big Walkman, listening to a book on tape. And I was listening to Stephen Covey, who was discussing the 7 habits of highly effective people. And I was on habit number 2. And the exercise was to think of yourself at your funeral. And what would the people be saying about you? Your spouse. In my case, my ex-spouse. Probably not really good things at that moment of time. My children. Well, they were pretty young, about 6 and 9, and pretty hurt. So probably some heartbreaking things would be said. Co-workers. I was living in San Diego. I'd moved there in '89. Wasn't working. Didn't have many of those, and also didn't have many people who were friends, really, because of being in the community not that long. And then he mentioned church family, and I wasn't really sure what he even meant by that. Although I knew I didn't have that either. Now, to be fair, I grew up in a Syrian Orthodox church. You know, I did hear about God and Jesus, but I hadn't been to church since I was 12. So all of this was kind of hitting me hard and making me think. This exercise really got to my heart and made me think. Not long after that, I had a discussion with my then 9.5-year-old daughter, and was asking her how things were going. How are things going with Dad not being there full time? I was concerned. And she said something that I'd never forget. She said, "Well, Daddy, at least I know I'm going to see you on Tuesdays and Thursdays." I knew things had to change. 6 months, a long 6 months of unemployment, I finally landed a job with Sun Microsystems. Our first seminar, the first month I was there, was cruising the internet. Who remembers those days? I think Al Gore was there because he invented the internet, right? Maybe not. So it was interesting. Things were changing. That beautiful woman who helped me at that time, we had gotten married. 2 more beautiful children. A 7-month-old with head surgery. Things were improving, but things were also getting more complicated. I realized that changes had to be made. And so when I started my new job, I set some good boundaries. Tuesdays and Thursdays, 5 p.m. No meetings. I will be gone. Fridays, every other week, I will be gone. You know, people started to respect those boundaries, which was something new for me to understand. And it really helped me. But it really wasn't enough. The question of faith kept coming up also. And I decided I should start looking into what I did believe. So let me fast forward. My wife asked me to move to beautiful Oregon. I thought the weather was like this all the time when I said no at first. She convinced me it wasn't. And it hasn't been, so that's fair. But we moved up here, and in 2004, I found myself as a full-time executive business coach, and I was sitting at the Mount Angel Abbey Library in February of 2004, creating my first life map. And for someone with my behavioral style, sitting alone for 8 hours, not talking to anybody, thinking, meditating, and writing, not the first thing I want to do. So I found myself in the basement of the library because I really had to get away from people so I could actually do this. And it was a struggle. And I want to share that with you because we're going to talk about the concept of it, and I want you to know it's not an easy process. Not an easy process, but it's valuable. It helped me start looking at my hours, my days, my minutes differently. I started to understand that what happens today does impact tomorrow. So as I was writing my eulogy, which is a fun exercise, I started thinking about what I wanted people to say, what I'd like them to say, what I hoped they would say. Over here. And then I started thinking about what they might say if I was to go right now. And this little thing in between, I think you might call a gap. So I realized more changes had to be made in my life, being more intentional with my life. And so I started to implement those things. The date night with my wife, the date night with my young daughter, coaching Little League baseball, soccer, which I don't really know much about. And is what one young girl asked me when I was coaching my daughter's soccer, how can you coach soccer if you don't know anything about it? And she was in 3rd grade, and I said, because I know more than you, now give me a lap. I've had to learn a little bit more about it, though, because that was not a good answer. So, and now I've been asked to coach basketball, which is really great, so we'll see how that goes. So a lot of things have changed and have impacted me that way. So I want to talk today about how you can create your own life map, what that would look like. You have a copy on your table, and I want to walk you through this process. So first of all, after you put your name and your date on it when you decide to do this, the first step is going to be for you to go through page 2 and think about who you want to be remembered by and what you hope they would remember about you. Now, this could be individuals. This could be, could be spouse, friend, child, or it could be a group of people. It could be your co-workers, people you spend vacations with as families, any of those. Once you complete this step, you get the pleasure of doing what I just described, writing a eulogy. As I always told my clients who worked with me, yeah, this is not optional. It's optional to coach with me, but it's not optional not to do a eulogy. So at this point in time, people usually ask me the question, should I write what I hope they would say, again, or what I think they would say? And I say, is there a difference? If there is, you might want to spend time working on that, because as you implement and write what you're going to put down, you hopefully will close that gap. So yes, what you hope they would say, and maybe what they would say today. So after you complete step 2, you're going to, on page 5, step 3, you're going to prioritize the most important areas of your life. I call them domains. So I shared a little bit about my story. I shared a little bit about my desire to uncover what I believed. And so today I can tell you I'm a man of faith, and that is my number 1 domain. It is the most important domain in my life map, and I believe that it impacts every other aspect of who I am. A husband, a father, a friend, a businessman. My second domain is my beautiful wife, Sandy. And then my 4 children. And because they do range in age from 8 to 24, each one has their own account, domain, area, because what I do with my 24-year-old is way different than what I do with my 8-year-old. And so I really have to differentiate that and make sure I put it down so I can be intentional about those activities. Now, your domains may look very different. You may prioritize them differently. That's okay. The key is for you to identify the areas that are most important to you, and then for you to prioritize them. Once you do that, we can talk about how do I then build out these domains so that I can become more intentional. But before you do that, there's an optional step, and this is optional. It's called the personal purpose statement or mission statement. What are you here to do? And I don't mean just at work, although it could be what you do. Mine is to influence, advise, and encourage everyone I meet so they're compelled to reach their full potential, gain wisdom, and live their lives with integrity. That's what I believe I'm here to do. That's why I coach. That's why I stand here and talk to you. So what's yours? Something to think about. Once you get that done, if you choose to do that portion of it, you move over to page 7, and you'll place your number 1 domain in that area, whatever it would be for you. There's 3 steps. The first is the vision. What do you see 20 years from now when you look at this domain? If we're talking about your spouse, your marriage, talking about one of your children, if you're talking about your faith, whatever it is, what do you see 20 years from now? What would it look like? What do you want it to look like? I recommend you write a little story, and you write it as if it's happening. So not what you think would be happening, but what you want to be happening. So for me, from my health account, I say I weigh a certain weight, my waist is a certain number, my back is strong, I'm able to continue activities that I want to do, that I'm doing these things. Working out, I'm still running, I'm still spinning, still playing tennis. It's a day in my life. That's my vision. That's what I want it to be 20 years from now. Once you decide what that looks like, then the question you have to ask is, why is that important? What's the purpose of this domain? Why is that important? And that could be different for all of you. For me, for my health, I want to have the ability to play with my grandchildren on the floor if I want to, run with them, still coach if I want to. I don't want to be limited by my physical situation. For me, that's from watching my mother, who didn't do that and was very limited in her last years before passing away a couple of years ago. And it was sad to see her come to San Diego to visit and be limited in her ability to walk or play with her grandchildren. So for me, that's really important. So that's the purpose for me. Once you identify those two steps, now the question is, what do I need to do back here today? What are the activities? I call them disciplines, but what are the activities I need to do? So an example could be, I need to have some kind of cardio each week. So under activity, I write cardio. Under description, I want to know what that is. So for me, it's 30 to 45 minutes, running or spinning. Under frequency, what does that mean? That means on Tuesday and Thursday mornings at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, except if it's this cold, you'll find me in my garage on my spinning bike with my headphones on, listening to music, spinning for 45 minutes. Or possibly going for a run with my wife on a Monday afternoon or a Saturday morning. Or now she's trying to drag me to kickboxing at the gym, one of 4 men in the class. Kind of interesting for me to learn those new skills. But so I want you to really be detailed about what this is. And the frequency should be something you can put in your calendar. If what you write down can't be put in the calendar, then you're not being clear enough. It needs to be an appointment that you can act on. Or an appointment that your coach could say to you, hey, how was that running last week? How many times did you do it? And for you to be able to say 1, 2, 3, or 4, not I did good or pretty good. That doesn't work. Now the be honest category is something that I've added. It's something I use with my clients 90 days after they've written their first life map, or 6 months, or as an example, tomorrow I'm going to spend a day with one of my executive clients in San Diego. I get to go back to San Diego tomorrow. I wasn't real excited about that at first because I didn't want to travel, but right now I am so excited about going to San Diego tomorrow, seeing my son who's going to school there, spending some time with some friends, and warming back up. But one of the things we're going to do is go through his life map, this client, and do an update. So the be honest category is at some point in time, either on your own or with your coach or with your accountability partner, you'd go through that question of running or spinning 2 to 3 times per week on these dates, and you'd say, how did I do last month? Or how did I do for this quarter? And you put a number from 1 to 10. 1, not very good. 10, nailing it, killing it. So that's what that column's for. You don't need to fill that out right now. Now the last thing regarding activities that might help you formulate what they are, because people sometimes ask the question, should I write down things I'm already doing really well at? And I go, yes. So think about, what are the things I'm doing today in this domain that I want to keep doing? I'm spinning, I'm running. It's part of my regular routine. Write it down, keep track of it. Understand where it is. Second thing is, what is something I might want to start doing that I know I need to do that I'm not doing right now? I joke and I share with people my recent life map that will be updated this month, because once a year I like to go out and spend 4 hours and just dig back into it and update it. But one of the things I even have in mind, and I left it there because it demonstrates an activity or a discipline that's not really accurate. It says, eat more vegetables. And my coach at the time didn't even call me on it. I left it there to see if he would, because it shouldn't be that. It should be eat vegetables or fruit 2 servings or 2 times a day, or whatever the real detail should be is what it should say. But I left it in there. I like to share it because it's an example of me, who knows better, still wanting to deflect a little bit. Do I really want to eat more vegetables? Not really. So, but you want to make sure that's very clear and specific. And then is there something you need to stop doing or limiting? So keep, start, stop. Make sure, and everybody has different behavioral styles, so some people who are very highly optimistic will want to put 30 things down. You got to do all these things, so don't get too carried away. Some people are very concise, and some people will be concerned about putting them down because they want to make sure they can definitely do it. Unless they definitely can do it, they won't write it down. Here's my recommendation. Pick 3 things. 3 things that you know you can act on. And leave it at that. Force yourself to do that. Okay. So that is the process of creating a life map. I talked about how it's impacted my life. I believe it'll impact yours. So I'm going to leave you with 3 things to think about. 1, pick a date between now and the next 2 weeks when you can get this done. The law of diminishing intent says the longer it takes from when you intend to do something to when you do it, the longer it takes, the probability of you doing it goes down dramatically. Great time of year to be thinking about life. Something a little bit more than New Year's resolutions, something a little bigger than that. So that's number 1. Pick a date the next 2 weeks. 2, commit 3 or 4 hours to do this. This is not an easy task. The version you have only has a place for you to work on your first 2 domains. I recommend you have no more than 8, because as you do the math of 8 and 3 activities per domain, that's 24. They've got to be in my calendar, and by the way, I'm already a busy person. You know, it's crazy enough as it is. You know, you start doing the math and it's kind of hard to do. So you only have 2 here, but it's usually a full day process, as I described, to fill all of it out. So if you're only going to work on 2 of them, pick 3 to 4 hours of your time. But here's the situation. If you say you're going to do it, and you even pick a date between now and the next 2 weeks, the probability of you doing it, statistically, from all the research shows that 33% of the people in the room who commit to do that will do it. That's not that high a number. Now, if you pick a day, you pick the time, you pick where you're going to do it, and you actually put it in your calendar, and you tell someone you're going to do it, probability goes up to 75%. So that's your coaching tip for the day. That's for anything you're going to do. Be aware of that. And the third thing is push yourself out of your comfort zone. This is not an easy thing to do. Lots of people, when I have these conversations with them, get excited for a few minutes and think about it, but you know what? They really, if they haven't done it, they might not want to do it. I mean, only 3% of adults even have clear written plans. And they accomplish 5 to 10 times more than the peers of equal education, equal ability. So my encouragement is push yourself out of your comfort zone. Try to do this. So here's what I want to leave you with. We're all in different places. We all have good days, bad days. I heard someone say this once to me, which really changed the way I view each day. He said, any day you wake up and you stretch out your arms and you don't feel the sides of a coffin, that is a good day. Thank you very much.
Hello? Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask Pat? We have time for a few Q&A. Yeah, at the bar there.
Yeah, when you work with particularly the senior executives, what's the thing that stops them from doing this?
So I'm going to repeat for the taping.
Thank you.
What typically stops people, or specifically senior executives, from doing this exercise?
What stops them from doing the life map? Well, it's not just senior executives that don't want to do it, by the way. Lots of people struggle with it. It's not easy to stop and think about what's really important to you. It's not easy to really think about where the gaps might be in your life. Unless you've already had the courage to actually take the step to be coached and ask someone else to really speak truth into your life, it's not an easy thing. Then there's the whole, trust of the person you're working with. So I think those are some of the big areas that keep people from doing it. It's not easy. It's out of your comfort zone. It forces you to make changes. I mean, those are a lot of the reasons why I've seen over the years why people struggle with it. But thank you for asking.
Other questions? Jason.
So, is there a set list of areas that you'd recommend, domains? I've seen a list of 7 areas so far, but family was just one area. I was interested to hear you speak your children and wife individually.
So
Yeah.
recommended domains.
Oh, do you want to repeat that again for the?
Yeah, the question is, do you have recommended domains?
Well, so that's an interesting question, recommended domains, because it is a very personal thing. I can answer the question probably better by saying, let me tell you what I've seen over 6 years. I see most people have an account for their spouse if they're married, for their children, for their health, careers, finance, faith or spirituality. Those are pretty much the typical ones I see. Some people break out health into mental health versus physical health. I definitely recommend you break out your spouse from your children. And the reason is, as you start looking at the activities, as I mentioned, a date night with my wife is a date night with my wife. It's not with my children. And then a date night with my daughter is very different. Or a hang time or throwing football with my son's very different. So if I group it as family, then one or two things happens. I end up with a lot of activities or disciplines within that domain, which gets kind of hard to manage. Or I do a little deflecting and I don't get as detailed. I talk more about the family stuff, but not about the individuals. And that's what you're really trying to do, is get intentional about the individuals. So, but thanks for asking that question.
Any others? Yeah.
What's the frequency that you recommend for reviewing where you're at?
So what's the recommended frequency for reviewing the life map?
That is a great question, because one thing I did not point you to that is in the back of your life map are some further definitions and some recommendations. So the first thing is, once you've gone through the process, you should review it for 10 minutes every day for the first 90 days. That sounds crazy, but the reality is, if you plan to doing every day for 10 minutes, you'll probably do it 5 times a week for 10 minutes. And that does not mean you read the whole thing, but here's what happens. You read it. It resonates with you. It reminds you of what you want to do. Or you read it and you realize, that's not really specific, or I'm not sure if that's really what I meant. My eulogy from the first time I wrote it, which was maybe a paragraph, to where it is today, which maybe is a little too much, 3 pages, but that's another story. I'm hoping they'll say a lot of good things. You know, it changed. It's going to evolve. Now, the other thing is that once you get through the first 90 days, then you should look at it at least once a week for maybe the next 90 days, and then I do a quarterly review, or I try to with my clients, and then every December I do an annual time away, either a half day or a full day, to review it and update it. So that's what I would recommend.
Okay, another time. We probably have time for another question. Yeah, in the back, Claudia.
What's the likelihood of success if you don't have a coach or an accountability partner?
So what's the likelihood of success if you don't have a coach or accountability partner?
And I did not pay you to say that, right? Okay, good. Well, you know, it's interesting. You know, one of the things that research shows regarding coaching is that one of the main reasons it has impact is because of the accountability aspect of it, and also the encouragement aspect of it. So I don't know, you have to be very careful. My wife's in market research, and she's always telling me that, you know, what's anecdotal versus really research. So anecdotally speaking, I believe that without someone asking you the tough questions, the same reason the first question came up regarding why don't we do it is we tend to want to avoid those things that are hard. Why we were made that way, why it's in our DNA, well, I can't answer that part, but that's what traditionally I see. I mean, you'd be surprised how many people get coached who still, as I call, deflecto man and woman. They'll go whatever they have to avoid that discussion with you. So I don't know what exactly it is, but it definitely drops without that accountability partner or coach.
Okay, well, thank you, Pat.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you all for your time.